Welcome to Bungalows for Bachelors number 9. Today we are going to discuss procurement, and it's going to be the last step of not site preparation of pre-construction. So we're going to go ahead and jump right in. All right, so phase 1 pre-construction procurement. What is procurement? Well, it is the act of obtaining your materials. In this case, procurement, in this, we're talking about building things, so it's about materials. As you see here, there's some lumber, a loader, and a truck with lumber on it. The truck with lumber symbolizing the act of things being procured, shipped from one place to another. All right, so what are some complications you can have with procurement? Well, let's go through some photos first because that'll be a little bit more exciting. Let me switch to this. Tab. Okay, so what you see here are photos taken when I was helping this guy build his 3-story house in Canyon Lake. This is an example of a complication in procurement. You would not think that this is a particularly difficult topic, but it's being talked about as its own topic because things like this can happen. What you're looking at is a truck with lumber on the side, and there's a kind of a ditch on the left with some steeper grade. Now, these shiny wooden ones, like the big huge boards, these are LVLs, and they have naturally more of a slippery coating on them. So whoever stacked the lumber kind of like stacked it too high, and these were on the bottom or something. So this truck driver drove on a slanted grade, and they literally slid off the truck. This happened about 100 feet, 200 feet or so from the property line, from the property that this was supposed to be delivered at. And the stuff was supposed to be delivered back behind the slab. So this basically just complicated everything because this stuff literally fell out on the ground. Material was broken. You can't pick this stuff up with a forklift now because it's unstacked, it's unbundled. You can't get the forks underneath it without breaking more stuff. So this was a bit of a headache. This is what the whole bundle looked like as it came off the top. There's some big old cedar posts in here that are supposed to look nice. These engineered beam things in here, these are expensive. This is not stuff you want to fall off the truck. So we had to basically move what we could out of the way so the truck could get out of the way, and then try to come in with the forklift and pick up what we could in the bands. And that's the inside of the house as it's done right now. And this is the outside of the house. So there's all that cedar. But yeah, that can happen. That can be a complication. But, and come back to there it goes. So what could go wrong? Well, in order of how procurement normally would flow, the first thing that can go wrong is poor estimation work. The idea of getting the right stuff on your site, when you need it, where you need it, and all of the right quantities and everything starts with a proper estimation. Now, we talked about that in materials estimating, so I'm not going to go into detail, but that is the first thing that needs to be correct in order to get to the final thing being correct. The next thing would be lazy verification of bids and pricing. So I gave an example in the materials class, materials estimating class, about that 84 lumber bid being sent back with incorrect materials on it, like quantities, things added in, things multiplied. When you get that stuff back, you have to verify and make sure things are correct. So if you're lazy and you just say, all right, they send it back, looks good to me, I'll pay that, boom, good to go, then that's going to be a complication. Another thing that'd be a complication would be scheduling miscommunications. So if you are expecting some of the material to arrive at some time or all the material to arrive at some time, that depends on if you're phasing materials or not. Maybe it's for weather, maybe it's for workload, maybe it's for timing, this, that, and the other. Either way, if you don't properly communicate scheduling, that can be a problem. It can also be a problem on the flip side if you're expecting all the material and they don't communicate properly and you also don't communicate properly. Then basically what might happen is, oh yeah, the floor joists are going to take an extra week to arrive. So like, that might matter if you're gonna, like, for this 3-story house, they were done with the first floor in a day because it was like 5 walls, and then they needed the floor joists and they weren't ready. So these things can have an impact. Wow, these things can have an impact. So loading incompetence can happen. Driving incompetence and unloading incompetence can happen, as shown in the example of the lumber being dropped. Now, in addition to things falling off the truck, which probably doesn't happen super often, but this was a load of like $80,000 worth of lumber. This is expensive stuff. You don't want this to happen. So, you know, these things can happen. Not good. What else? What can also be complicated is whoever's stacking this lumber, if they don't understand what they're doing, they might put all of your like bottom plate, like first floor treated plate stock at the bottom of your stack or something stupid like that. And they take the stack off, it's all bundled, fine, it's all good. But you have to move 80 pieces of lumber or whatever to get to the bottom of your stack to start building. Like, you want things stacked in order so that they're on top, and that makes stuff make sense. So we'll talk about how to fix these things in the next slide. But other things that can go wrong is location access. You can see the size of this truck that's delivering this lumber. These are big trucks. So if you're on a road with a super like steep, sharp turn, or you've got a bunch of low-hanging trees, or there's only one way into a property and they're gonna have a hard time backing in and stuff, that these trucks most of the time come with a forklift that hangs off the back. So the forklift can like maneuver and get the stuff into tighter spaces, no big deal, usually. But it is important to understand that the big trucks are going to arrive on a certain size. So you got to keep in mind how's that going to be worked with. Poor staging can be a problem in that, the basic premise is here, while you have the forklift at your disposal, it ought to be used to move things where you want them to be, where they're going to be picked up, cut, and put on the house. If they stage stuff in the wrong spot, either because you're not there or you didn't communicate or whatever it may be, then you have to move it again. And you're most likely not going to have a forklift unless you happen to rent one or something. So, that should be kept in mind. And of course, weather is important, because if you're trying to phase things, or if you're building a big house and you have a small crew, you might not want all the lumber at once. You might want the plates and the walls and the headers and stuff like that. And then maybe you'll get the roof, stuff delivered afterwards, especially if you're in a bad weather situation. The longer you can keep the wood out of the weather, the better the end product is going to be. So weather can be a complication. So what is the ultimate solution to all these problems? Well, as a wise man once said, ownership is a solution to most of these problems. You need to take ownership of the situation to get exactly what you want out of the situation, while recognizing that sometimes mistakes are going to happen and problems are going to arise anyway, despite your best steps. However, if you want the best possible solution, then you need to be extremely thorough when you're doing materials estimation, or if you're going to use a third party, then do your research and pick somebody that is going to do a good job. You can check, double check, and triple check materials bids, prices / lists from suppliers. Like I said before, when they send the wrong information, which is probably going to happen because the lists are like 50 items long, and the guy who's putting the list together is probably bored, then, problems are going to arise. You need to check that, correct that. You have to work through all that until at the very least, the order list doesn't have any problems in it, because that's just, if it already does, then you're already screwed. So you need to be confirming with phone calls any special circumstances regarding timeline of deliveries. If you are, a lot of the back and forth with the materials list is going to be email, most likely. But the more you are speaking with people and the more they're familiar with your circumstances, the better off you're going to be in them being able to pass along important information to other people that need to know it. So you got to get involved when this stuff's happening. You can't just let it go. One of the things that I talked about was improperly loaded materials, improperly unloaded. Now, every business is in a state where they're probably growing, they're probably hiring new people, so some people, there's always people being trained, there's always these circumstances. However, it's a good idea to do your research on the building suppliers in your area, because more than likely, it's possible somebody did a review and said something like this happened at some point, and to You can take it with a grain of salt if you want, but at least there's some risk or something like that. But you want to theoretically, if you find a well-known, well-respected building supplier, you're not going to get that kind of problem. Um, so that's what you can do to kind of mitigate that somewhat. And of course, you want to communicate any possible access difficulties. So this is usually best done in a visual way because people are most of the time visual learners, things like that. So if you call someone on the phone and you say, "Hey, my site's kind of difficult to get to, is this going to be a problem?" and you're vague like that, the person on the phone is probably going to say, "Yeah, it'll be fine. We'll figure it out. No big deal." Whereas if you send an email of a drawing, look, here's Google Maps, here's the route, here's this big old S curve that's super steep. There's this tree here that needs to be avoided. I can cut this path over here and get you access to come in this way or something. And you have way more detail and you talk to somebody about it, then you're more likely going to be able to catch this before the driver shows up on your site and they can't get in because they can't and it's not possible or they don't know how or something like that. So you can do that. It's a good idea to have a staging plan. It would be courteous when people arrive. They're doing their job. They're going to park, they're going to, greet you, and they will start unloading the stuff and putting it wherever you tell them to put it. So if you're kind of bumbling around like a fool, not telling them, not knowing where to put it and thinking about it, and I changed my mind, move this here. It's not considerate and it's a waste of time and it's just not helpful. So you need to have an idea of where you'd like this stuff to go. And of course, in terms of weather, know which season you're building in because the weather has an impact. And if everything's going to get rained on anyway, then maybe it matters less. But if you have an idea for weather and your staging and phasing of things, then it's a better idea. It's better than just going in blind. So, that is that. There aren't very many books on this subject. You can learn more about procurement tactics in a more formal sense, not necessarily related to construction itself, at least for residential. There's some stuff on YouTube, but nobody really talks about how did I get my materials delivered to my house. And so, you're pretty much going to have to go by experience or by what other people say, what advice other people might give. But a great place to start, basically go to your local building supplier and just start asking them questions about how this process would normally go. And they'll be happy to tell you about it. And that's probably the best way to learn that kind of thing. Aside from doing it, and boy, will you do it. The client with a 3-story house he learned about procurement and he learned about what can happen. So that said, that is the end of Bungalows of Bachelor's number 9 procurement. We will be jumping into site preparation stuff on the next class. So thank you for watching.